say it's positive thinking. We use positive thinking a great deal to solve problems these days. And he did it, but he didn't know it. His positive thinking was to think there was something better than he was that could take care of him. He didn't think he could do it for himself, but he thought it could be done. And that began the development of theologies and philosophies and moral systems. They were all part of man's desperate determination to answer the hurt that he had today. He could remember the hurts of yesterday and what caused them. That might prevent him from repeating the hurt. But in the history of civilization, the repetitions of hurt have seldom if ever been identical. And the man who had a hurt a week ago learned something from it may get no helpful information from another hurt today or next week. Each situation is a complete problem in itself. And the only way to meet the complete problem of mankind is by the complete use of the faculties which we have been given to solve problems with. Now, in our first talk of this series, the problems we are discussing are physical. They will come very well, therefore, under the general heading of science. And we know from the history of science several things that are important. We get a hint about science from tradition, from memory. Memory, if we look up science in the dictionary, we find out what the memory of science is. And we find out what it was supposed to do, how it was supposed to do it, and what its best conclusions were. Now, these conclusions may not be too good, and many of them will have to be rejected, and many of them have been completely contradicted. But there are some that have stood the weight in time of years, and these we have to study in terms of scientific. But the moment we come to a scientific problem, then we have to turn it over to the mind, because no scientific problem is completely solved. It is in some form of being solved, or it is being rejected as not possibly to be solved. But anyway, we'll assume that the mind takes over the problem. Now, it can then immediately look it up in the best book on the subject, and will then find the memory of that problem. It will find the memory of the Spanish Inquisition. It will find the memory of the Crusades. It will remind us of the wars that have gone, the great wars of Attila and Alaric. It will teach us a little bit about the Charlemagne and Napoleon and Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin. And will give us a very interesting cross-section of all these things. But what we're reading is memories. Therefore, we can find out what happened, but memory cannot tell us what to do about it. Memory can only recall that this was an outrage, or this was a terrible thing. We've had those kind of answers for centuries. In the present century, we have had the two worst wars in history, and behind this is over 3,000 years of records of these things, but still no solution. We know, for instance, that war is what it is, but how to do something about it. So today the foremost nations of the world are trying to figure out what to do about it. And their first job has been to go back into the memory bank and see what was there, and to find out why these things happened. And with the aid of the memory bank, they have found out what happened, and why and how it happened. But it ends as a statistic. There is nothing in the memory bank that can give them a clear vision of solution. The memory bank may be morally informative. It may just tell us all that we shouldn't fight, but this doesn't solve the problem. We also have the consideration from memory of all the various experiments that we try in daily living, our paying bills, whether we live within our means, and all these things are in the memory bank. But when it comes to daily life, we more or less ignore that. We do not learn from experience. We keep right on trying to do it our way. We can read from the memory bank of other people, as in the case of narcotics addiction, and find out what it does, but it does not prevent us from turning in our turn to the same vices and devices. So there's a great problem all now is trying to find out some of the facts about the human being. Facts that were amazingly understood long ago, understood at a time when there was no way of simply reading your way into a solution. There were ancient writings. There were books on anatomy and physiology in Egypt 4,000 years ago. Even if we could find them all, we'd probably pay no attention to them, because they belong to another generation, another world, another time. But they represent the memory bank of how to keep the peace. But all the memories in the world will not keep the peace, for the reason the ambition of the individual is far too powerful to answer and to respect these discoveries. So the mind must step in and work with the material, and must also add to the memory of the past the experience of now. The mind, therefore, has to work with now, and now in some way never quite fits the past. It never quite solves the mysteries of the past, and the mysteries of the past never quite solve the modern problem. The nearest we can gain for moral solution is ethics, which will contribute something, but most people are unwilling to live according to it. Now from the human body we gain a whole group of interesting facts. As I said, Paracelsus says that there are three parts to the mystery of man. Man as a causal, spiritual being, man as an intellectual individual, and man as a physical body. These three correspond to the three worlds recognized by antiquity: heaven, earth, and hell. And the Rosicrucian author Flood made a very good study of this particular point. He shows that for the comparison that the skull seated upon the anchored bridge of the neck represents in this point the intellectual center. The physical center is in the physical body. It surrounds the heart and the most vital organs. The combination or union of the two is corresponding with the development of the autonomic nervous system and the upper part of the body. So we have heaven, earth, and hell as brain, heart, and physical abdominal structure. In these Rosicrucian studies, Flood shows a picture of the abdominal cavity, which he describes as hell. And maybe that is the reason why so many individuals have considered our food projects and our food habits to be one of the greatest enemies that we have. The individual dies first in the abdominal cavity by the misuse of its function and by the abuse of its principles. The problem of taking care of that, however, is largely a problem of justice. The individual will find out gradually that nothing he ignores will do him any good. He cannot think himself out of an action and get anywhere. He cannot forget something he doesn't want to remember and come through in perfect condition. He must recognize that the human body has its requirements. And these requirements on their own plane are the same as the requirements of a nation, of the planet, and of the solar system. Everything that is needed for man is needed also in some form or condition for the whole of the universe, all the way to the ultimate causation. We live in a world, therefore, in which all problems break down into one grand problem. And unless we approach the one grand problem, we cannot get too far with any part of it. Now with man, the governors of man are the mind and the emotions and the physical body. And these three have their private tyrannies and are the causes of most of the problems that we face. These same causes in a nation produce war, bankruptcy, sedition, if abused. These three qualities in the world result in the great natural astronomical phenomena